Light does not experience time. A photon, a single particle of light, travels from the surface of the sun to your eye in 8 minutes. You measure 8 minutes. The photon measures 0. Not a very short time, not a nanosecond, not a femtosecond, 0. For a photon, the moment it is emitted and the moment it is absorbed are the same moment. The journey from the sun to your eye, 150 million kilometers of empty space, takes no time at all. The photon does not travel through time. It exists outside time. The beginning and the end of its journey are simultaneous, identical, one. And this is not just true of sunlight. It is true of every photon in the universe. The photon from the most distant galaxy, a photon that you measure as having traveled 13 billion years, experienced 0 time. For that photon, the moment of its emission at the birth of the universe and the moment of its absorption in the retina of your eye right now are the same moment. The entire history of the cosmos, 13.8 billion years of expansion, of stars forming and dying, of galaxies colliding and merging, of life emerging and evolving, is, from the perspective of light, instantaneous. Light is eternal. Light is timeless. Light exists in a permanent, unchanging now. Every major religion on earth identifies God with light. Christianity, God is light, and in him is no darkness at all. 1 John 1-5. Buddhism, the Buddha's enlightenment is described as the arising of a great light, aloko udapadi, and the highest state of consciousness is called the clear light. Islam, God is the light of the heavens and the earth. Surah An-Nur 24-35. Hinduism, the ultimate reality is Jyoti Jyoti, the light of lights. This is not a metaphor we are going to discard. This is the starting point of a question that will take us deep into physics, deep into consciousness, and deep into the most ancient descriptions of the divine. What is light? Why does it behave the way it does? Why is it timeless? And what does it mean that every spiritual tradition on earth chose the same word light to describe the deepest reality they could perceive? To understand why light does not experience time, you need to understand what light actually is. And the answer to that question took humanity 300 years, 4 revolutions in physics, and the combined genius of the greatest scientific minds in history. The story begins with Isaac Newton. In 1672, Newton published his experiments with prisms, showing that white light is not pure, but is composed of a spectrum of colors. He proposed that light is made of tiny particles, corpuscles, that travel in straight lines at enormous speed. This corpuscular theory dominated physics for over a century. But there was a problem. In 1801, Thomas Young performed the double-slit experiment, one of the most important experiments in the history of science. He passed light through 2 narrow slits in a barrier and observed the pattern on a screen behind the barrier. If light were made of particles, you would expect 2 bright bands, one behind each slit. Instead, Young observed an interference pattern alternating bright and dark bands, exactly like the pattern produced when 2 water waves overlap. The bright bands appeared where the waves from the 2 slits reinforced each other. The dark bands appeared where they cancelled each other out. Light was a wave, not a particle. A wave. Newton was wrong. Then came the revolution that changed everything. In the 1860s, James Clerk Maxwell, a Scottish physicist of extraordinary mathematical genius, accomplished one of the greatest unifications in the history of science. He showed that electricity and magnetism are not 2 separate forces. They are 2 aspects of a single force, electromagnetism. And he showed that electromagnetic waves, oscillating patterns of electric and magnetic fields, feeding into each other and propagating through space travel at exactly the speed of light. This was the thunderbolt. Light is an electromagnetic wave. The light from the sun, the glow of a candle, the flash of lightning, the signal from a radio tower, the X-ray in a hospital, the gamma ray from a supernova, they are all the same thing. Electromagnetic radiation. Different frequencies. Same fundamental phenomenon. Maxwell unified optics with electrodynamics in 4 elegant equations, Maxwell's equations, that are, to this day, among the most beautiful and powerful equations in all of physics. But Maxwell's equations contained a mystery. They predicted the speed of electromagnetic waves with extraordinary precision, 299,792,458 meters per second. And this speed appeared in the equations as a fundamental constant, not a variable, not a quantity that depends on circumstances. A constant. The speed of light was built into the laws of electromagnetism the way the number pi is built into the geometry of circles. It was not something that could change. It was a feature of reality itself. And the question was, a constant relative to what? If you are on a moving train, the speed of a ball depends on who is measuring. The ball moves at one speed relative to the train and a different speed relative to the ground. But Maxwell's equations did not specify a reference frame. The speed of light was the same period. No relative to what, just the same. What substance was oscillating to produce these electromagnetic waves? The answer, proposed by physicists in the 19th century, was the luminiferous ether, an invisible, weightless, all-pervading substance that filled all of space and served as the medium through which light waves propagated. And the speed of light, it was assumed, was constant relative to this ether. In 1887, Albert Michelson and Edward Morley performed the most famous null experiment in the history of physics. They attempted to detect the Earth's motion through the ether by measuring the speed of light in different directions. If the Earth was moving through the ether, light should travel faster in the direction of motion and slower against it, just as a boat moves faster downstream than upstream. Their instrument, an interferometer of extraordinary precision, could detect differences in light speed as small as 1 part in 10 billion. They found nothing. The speed of light was exactly the same in every direction. The ether did not exist. Light did not need a medium. It propagated through empty space at exactly the same speed, regardless of the motion of the source or the observer. This result was devastating. It violated everything physicists understood about waves, about motion, about the nature of space and time. It sat there, unexplained, like a crack in the foundation of physics until a 26-year-old patent clerk in Bern, Switzerland, realized what it meant. In 1905, Albert Einstein published the special theory of relativity. The paper was titled On the Electrodynamics of Moving Bodies, and it began with a single revolutionary postulate. The speed of light is the same for all observers, regardless of their motion. This sounds simple. It is not. It is the most counterintuitive statement in the history of physics. If you are standing on a train moving at 100 kilometers per hour and you throw a ball forward at 50 kilometers per hour, an observer on the ground sees the ball moving at 150 kilometers per hour. Speeds add. This is Galilean relativity. It is common sense. It is obvious, but light does not obey this rule. If you are standing on a train moving at 100,000 kilometers per second, 1/3 the speed of light, and you shine a flashlight forward, the light does not travel at 400,000 kilometers per second relative to the ground. It travels at 300,000 kilometers per second, exactly the same speed as if you were standing still. The speed of light is not affected by the motion of the source. It is absolute, invariant, the same for everyone. Einstein realized that if the speed of light is constant, then something else must change, and what changes is time itself. If you and I are moving at different speeds, we experience different rates of time. My seconds are not the same length as your seconds. My clocks tick at a different rate than your clocks. And both of us are right, there is no true rate of time. Time is relative. It depends on your velocity. The mathematical consequences are precise and extraordinary. As your speed increases, time slows down. At half the speed of light, time runs at 87% of normal. At 90% of the speed of light, time runs at 44%. At 99%, time runs at 14%. And at the speed of light itself, at exactly 299,792,458 meters per second, time stops. Completely, totally. Time does not slow down at the speed of light. It ceases to exist. This is not a theoretical abstraction. It has been experimentally verified hundreds of times. Muons, subatomic particles produced by cosmic rays in the upper atmosphere, have a half-life of 2.2 microseconds. At the speed they travel 99.95% of the speed of light, they should decay before reaching the ground. But they do not decay. Their internal clocks are running so slowly, relative to our clocks, that they survive the journey. Time dilation is real. It is measured. It is used in the GPS satellites that guide your phone. And for a photon, a particle traveling at exactly the speed of light, time dilation reaches its ultimate extreme. Time does not merely slow down, it stops. The photon exists in a state of zero time. No duration, no before and after, no sequence of events, no experience of passage. For the photon, emission and absorption are simultaneous. The journey does not happen. Or rather, the journey happens in an instant that has no duration, an eternal now. But light is not just timeless, it is also spaceless. Special relativity predicts that as your speed increases, not only does time slow down, but distances contract in the direction of motion. This is length contraction, the Lorentz contraction. At 90% of the speed of light, distances in the direction of travel shrink to 44% of their rest length. At 99%, they shrink to 14%. And at the speed of light itself, distances contract to zero. For a photon, the distance between the sun and your eye is zero. The distance between the most distant galaxy and your retina is zero. The photon does not cross space. It does not traverse the 150 million kilometers between the sun and the earth. From the photon's frame of reference, those 150 million kilometers do not exist. The sun and your eye are at the same location. The most distant galaxy and your retina are at the same point. Everything is here, right now. No distance, no duration, no separation. The photon exists in a state where all of space is contracted to a single point, and all of time is compressed to a single instant. The entire universe, from the Big Bang to the heat death, from one end of the observable cosmos to the other, is, from the photon's perspective, a single point existing for a single moment. Pause and absorb this. The photon that left a star in the Andromeda galaxy 2.5 million years ago and just struck the detector of a telescope, that photon did not experience a 2.5 million year journey. It did not experience 2.5 million light years of distance. For that photon, Andromeda and the telescope are the same place. The moment of emission and the moment of detection are the same time. The photon connected 2 points across 2.5 million light years of space and 2.5 million years of time, and from its own perspective, there was nothing between them. No space, no time, no separation, only unity, only contact, only now. Every photon in the universe is like this. The cosmic microwave background, the radiation left over from the Big Bang, emitted 380,000 years after the birth of the cosmos. When the universe cooled enough for atoms to form and light to travel freely, those photons have been traveling for 13.8 billion years by our clocks. But by their own measure, they were emitted an instant ago. The Big Bang, for light, just happened. The birth of the universe and this very moment are simultaneous. Light remembers nothing because for light there is nothing to remember. There is only an eternal, timeless now, in which the entirety of cosmic history is compressed into a single point. This is extraordinary, and it has implications that most physicists acknowledge but rarely explore. If you were to ask, what does the universe look like from the perspective of light? The answer would be a singularity, a point of infinite density and zero dimension, where all events are simultaneous and all locations are identical. This description, a timeless, spaceless, dimensionless point from which all of reality is perceived as one, is not just a mathematical abstraction. It is a precise description of what mystics across every tradition have described as the experience of the divine. In the Christian mystical tradition, Meister Eckhart, the 14th century Dominican theologian and mystic, described God's mode of existence as the eternal now. The Nunc stans, God, does not experience time. Sequentially, God does not remember the past or anticipate the future. For God, all of time is simultaneously present. All events past, present, and future exist in a single, undivided act of awareness. This is not metaphor. This is Eckhart's precise theological claim about the nature of divine consciousness, and it is mathematically identical to what special relativity says about the photon's frame of reference. Eckhart wrote, "The now wherein God made the first man, and the now wherein the last man will perish, and the now in which I speak, all are one in God, in whom there is only one now." Replace God with photon, and you have a statement that any physicist would accept. The photon's now contains the beginning and the end of the universe. The first moment and the last moment coexist. There is only one now. Eckhart, writing in the 13th century, described the temporal structure of a photon's existence with perfect accuracy 600 years before Einstein derived the mathematics. Augustine of Hippo, perhaps the most influential theologian in Western Christianity, reached a similar conclusion through a different path. In his Confessions, Augustine asked, "What was God doing before he created the universe?" And he answered, "The question is meaningless. God did not create the universe in time. God created time itself. God exists outside of time in an eternal present that contains all moments simultaneously. Creation was not an event that happened at a particular moment. It is an eternal act perpetually occurring, perpetually present, perpetually now. This Augustinian eternity is not infinite time. It is the absence of time. It is the state that physics attributes to light." In Buddhism, the concept of sunyata, emptiness, describes a reality beyond space and time, beyond separation and distinction, beyond the categories that organize ordinary experience. The Heart Sutra, one of the most important texts in Mahayana Buddhism, declares, "Form is emptiness, emptiness is form." The physical world of distinct objects separated by space and time is, at the deepest level, undifferentiated. The separation is appearance, the unity is reality. The great Zen master Dogen, writing in 13th century Japan, taught that time and being are inseparable. In his masterwork, the Shobogenzo, he introduced the concept of uji being time. Time is not a container in which things exist. Time is existence itself. Each moment contains all of being. Each being contains all of time. being time means that the present moment is the only reality it contains. The entire universe, the entire past, the entire future. There is no time apart from this moment. There is no being apart from this now. The photon's frame of reference, where all distances are zero and all times are simultaneous, is a physical realization of what Dogen and Eckhart independently described. The emptiness of space, the fullness of the eternal now, the collapse of all distinction into a single, undivided point. But wait, there is a technical objection that I need to address, and it is important for intellectual honesty. Strictly speaking, the photon does not have a frame of reference. Special relativity says that the laws of physics are the same in all inertial frames moving at constant velocity. But no massive object can reach the speed of light. The Lorentz transformation, the mathematical framework that relates measurements in different frames, becomes singular at the speed of light. The time dilation factor goes to infinity. The length contraction goes to zero. The equations break down. This means you cannot formally construct a reference frame for a photon. You cannot ask, what does the universe look like from the photon's point of view? In the strict mathematical sense of special relativity, the question is not well defined within the standard framework. But, and this is crucial, the limit is well defined. As your speed approaches the speed of light, time dilation approaches infinity, and length contraction approaches zero. The trend is unambiguous. The closer you get to the speed of light, the slower time passes and the shorter distances become. The mathematical limit, the value these quantities approach as velocity approaches c, is zero time and zero distance. The photon does not experience time or space, even if we cannot formally describe its perspective in the language of special relativity. Most physicists accept this limit as physically meaningful, even if technically the photon does not have a proper reference frame. The photon is timeless. The photon is spaceless. This is not controversial. What is controversial is what it means. In 1905, the same miraculous year in which he published Special Relativity, Einstein also published a paper on the photoelectric effect that would earn him the Nobel Prize. In this paper, Einstein proposed that light is not just a wave, it is also a particle, a quantum of energy called a photon. Light is simultaneously a wave and a particle. It is both. It is neither. It is something for which human language has no adequate word. The wave-particle duality of light was confirmed by decades of experiments. The double-slit experiment, Young's experiment from 1801, was performed with single photons, one photon at a time. The result was astonishing. A single photon passing through the double slit produces an interference pattern, a wave pattern. Not immediately a single photon hits the screen at a single point, like a particle, but send millions of photons through, one at a time, and the pattern that emerges on the screen is an interference pattern, a wave pattern. Each individual photon behaves as a particle. The collection behaves as a wave. Each photon somehow knows about both slits. Each photon interferes with itself. It passes through both slits simultaneously. It is in two places at once. But here is where the mystery deepens to the point of impossibility. If you place a detector at the slits, if you try to determine which slit the photon actually passes through, the interference pattern disappears. The photon behaves as a particle. It goes through one slit or the other, not both. The act of looking changes the result. The act of observation transforms the photon's behavior from wave-like to particle-like, from both to one, from possibility to actuality. This is the quantum measurement problem in its purest form, and it was discovered with light. Before observation, the photon exists in a superposition, a quantum state that includes all possible paths simultaneously. After observation, the superposition collapses into a single, definite outcome. The act of observation, the act of conscious measurement, transforms the photon from a wave of possibilities into a particle of actuality. John Wheeler, one of the greatest physicists of the 20th century, the man who coined the term black hole, pushed this further with his delayed choice experiment. Wheeler showed that you can decide whether to observe the photon after it has already passed through the slits. You can wait until the photon has already committed to its path and then, retroactively, change whether it behaves as a wave or a particle. The photon's past behavior is determined by a future observation. The future influences the past. Through light, causality itself becomes fluid. Light, it seems, responds to consciousness, not metaphorically, physically. The behavior of a photon depends on whether it is observed. The fundamental nature of light, wave, or particle, spread out or localized, possible or actual, is determined by the act of looking. In the Zen Buddhist tradition, there is a famous koan. If a tree falls in the forest and no one is there to hear it, does it make a sound? The quantum version of this koan is, if a photon passes through a slit and no one measures it, does it go through one slit or two? And the answer from quantum mechanics is, it goes through both, until you look. Then it goes through one. Reality, at the level of light, is not fixed until it is perceived. Existence and observation are entangled. Being and knowing are inseparable. The Buddhist philosopher Nagarjuna, the most important thinker in the Mahayana tradition, writing in the 2nd century CE, argued that nothing has intrinsic existence. Nothing exists from its own side, independently of observation and conditions. Everything exists only in relation to other things in dependence on conditions, on perspective, on the act of apprehension. This is the doctrine of dependent origination, Pratitya Samutpada, the cornerstone of Buddhist philosophy. And it is, stated in different language, the Copenhagen interpretation of quantum mechanics. The photon has no definite state independent of measurement. It exists only in relation to the observer. Its properties are not intrinsic but relational. Nagarjuna and Niels Bohr, separated by 18 centuries, arrived at the same conclusion about the nature of reality through the investigation of consciousness and through the investigation of light. The Gospel of John opens with the most famous words in the New Testament. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. In him was life, and that life was the light of all mankind. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. The Greek word for word is logos, which means not just word but reason, order, the principle of intelligibility, the deep structure that makes the universe comprehensible. The logos is the divine intelligence that orders and illuminates all of reality, and John identifies the logos with light, not with energy, not with matter, not with force, with light. This identification is not casual. John wrote his gospel in the context of Greek philosophy, where the logos was already a technical term used by the Stoics to describe the rational principle governing the cosmos, used by the Jewish philosopher Philo of Alexandria to describe the intermediary between the transcendent God and the material world. By identifying the logos with light, John was making a precise claim. The ordering principle of the universe, the intelligence that structures reality, that makes the cosmos coherent rather than chaotic, is identical with light. The medium through which we see is the medium through which the universe is organized. Illumination and intelligibility are the same thing. The Eastern Orthodox tradition took this further. Gregory Palamas, the 14th century Byzantine theologian, developed the doctrine of the uncreated light. At the Transfiguration on Mount Tabor, Jesus' face shone like the sun and his clothes became as white as the light. Palamas argued that this light was not metaphorical, it was not reflected sunlight. It was not a natural phenomenon. It was the uncreated energy of God, the divine light that has existed eternally, that illuminated Moses on Sinai, that struck Paul on the road to Damascus, and that the hesychast monks of Mount Athos experience in deep contemplative prayer. This uncreated light, in Palamite theology, is the direct manifestation of God's presence, not God's essence, which is unknowable, but God's energy, which is experienceable. And it is, literally, light, not metaphorical light, real, perceived, experienced light, experienced by consciousness in its deepest states of contemplation. If quantum mechanics is right that light responds to consciousness, that the behavior of photons depends on observation, then John's identification of divine consciousness with light is not just poetry, it is physics. The logos, the divine awareness, and light, the physical phenomenon, share the same fundamental property. They are the point where consciousness and reality meet, where observation creates actuality, where looking brings the world into being. We are not yet finished with light, because light does not just refuse to experience time, it actively defies our understanding of causality. It connects events across the universe instantaneously through quantum entanglement, and every entanglement experiment ever performed has used photons as the primary carrier. It bends around massive objects through gravitational lensing, allowing us to see galaxies behind other galaxies, as if the universe itself is arranging light to reveal what would otherwise be hidden. It carries information about the birth of the cosmos in the cosmic microwave background, a message written in light 13.8 billion years ago that we are only now learning to read. And it raises the most profound question in all of physics. If light is timeless, and if God is described as timeless in every major theology, and if consciousness collapses light from possibility into actuality, then what is the relationship between light, consciousness, and God? Are they three different things that share properties? Or three names for the same thing viewed from different angles, the physicist's angle, the mystic's angle, and the philosopher's angle? Paul, writing to Timothy, described God as dwelling in unapproachable light, whom no one has seen or can see. The Buddha, in the Mahaparinibbana Sutta, was described at the moment of his death as radiating a light that illuminated the entire grove. The Amitabha tradition in Pure Land Buddhism centers on the Buddha of infinite light, Amitabha, whose very name means boundless radiance. Light, it seems, is not just a metaphor that religions borrow from nature. It is the point where physics and theology converge, where the measurable and the immeasurable meet, where the equation and the prayer describe the same reality. That convergence is next. In the previous part, we discovered something extraordinary about light. A photon does not experience time. A photon does not experience space. For a photon, the moment of emission and the moment of absorption are the same moment. The entire universe, from the Big Bang to the heat death of the cosmos, is, from light's perspective, a single point existing for a single instant. Light is timeless. Light is spaceless. Light exists in an eternal now. But we are not finished, because light does something even stranger than existing outside time. It actively connects events across time. It links the past to the future in ways that violate everything we thought we knew about causality. It allows the future to change the past. And it is the medium through which every particle in the universe communicates with every other particle, the invisible thread that holds reality together. This is the physics of light as connector, as mediator, as the fabric that weaves the universe into a single, coherent whole. And the parallels to what the Christian and Buddhist traditions describe as the nature of divine reality are so precise that they cannot be ignored. Let me start with light cones, because they define the structure of causality itself. In special relativity, the speed of light is not just a speed limit, it is the boundary of causation. Nothing can travel faster than light, not matter, not energy, not information, not influence. This means that if an event happens here and now, say, a supernova explodes in a distant galaxy, that event cannot affect you until light from the explosion has had time to reach you. If the supernova is 1,000 light years away, you are safe for 1,000 years. Nothing from the supernova, no radiation, no gravitational wave, no particle, no signal, can reach you before the light does. The light defines the boundary of what can affect you and what cannot. This boundary is called the light cone. Imagine a diagram where space is horizontal and time is vertical. You are at the center. Draw lines extending upward and outward at 4-5 degree angles. These represent the paths of light rays traveling away from you into the future. Everything inside this cone, everything that a light signal from your current position could reach, is your future light cone. These are the events you can influence. Everything outside the cone, everything too far away for even light to reach, is causally disconnected from you. You cannot affect it. It cannot affect you. You are, in the deepest physical sense, separate. Now draw lines extending downward and outward at 4-5 degree angles. These represent light rays that could have traveled toward you from the past. Everything inside this cone is your past light cone. These are the events that could have influenced you, events whose light has had time to reach your current position. Everything outside the past light cone has had no opportunity to affect you. It is as if those events, for you, do not exist. Your entire experience of reality, everything you have ever seen, heard, felt, or known, is contained within your past light cone. The stars you see in the night sky are not the stars as they are now. They are the stars as they were when their light was emitted years, centuries, millennia ago. The sun you see is the sun 8 minutes ago. The moon you see is the moon 1.3 seconds ago. Even the person sitting next to you, you see them as they were a nanosecond ago. The time it takes light to travel from their face to your eyes. You have never seen the present. You have only ever seen the past, delivered to you by light. Your entire perceptual reality is a construction assembled from photons that left their sources at different times and arrived at your retina at the same moment, creating the illusion of a simultaneous, unified present that does not, in the strictest physical sense, exist. The light cone is the structure of reality itself. It defines what is connected and what is separate, what can influence what can cause what. The entire causal structure of the universe, every cause and every effect, every action and every consequence, is determined by light. Light does not just illuminate reality, it constructs it. It defines the boundaries of the possible. And here is what makes this profound. The light cone is not a property of space or time. It is a property of light. Change the speed of light, and you change the structure of causality. Change the structure of causality, and you change what it means for events to be connected. The entire fabric of cause and effect, the entire structure of the universe as a web of related events, is woven by light. Light is not a passenger in the universe. Light is the architect. It determines what can interact with what. It determines what is real for whom. It determines the shape of reality itself. Consider what this means. Without light, without the electromagnetic interaction, there would be no causal structure, no web of connections linking events across space-time, no ordered universe, just disconnected points in a void. Light does not merely travel through a pre-existing structure of space-time. Light creates the structure, the causal order of the universe, the fact that events are connected, that causes produce effects, that the universe has a coherent history rather than a random scattering of unrelated happenings exists. because light exists. Take away light, and you take away order. Take away light, and you take away meaning. Take away light, and you take away reality as we know it. In the Nicene Creed, the foundational statement of Christian belief, recited in churches around the world for 17 centuries, Jesus Christ is described as light from light, true God from true God, begotten not made, of one substance with the Father, through whom all things were made. Through whom all things were made. The Logos identified with light in the Gospel of John is the agent of creation, not just the illuminator of creation, but its cause, the principle through which all things come into being. The Nicene Creed identifies the creative principle of the universe with light, and physics identifies the causal structure of the universe with light. The creed and the equations point to the same conclusion. Light is not just a thing in the universe. It is the thing that makes the universe, a connected, ordered, causal whole, rather than a random collection of disconnected events. Now let me take you to the most disturbing experiment in the history of physics, the delayed choice quantum eraser. Because this experiment suggests that light does not just connect the present to the future, it connects the future to the past. The setup is an extension of the double-slit experiment. You send photons through two slits. Normally, if you do not observe which slit the photon passes through, you get an interference pattern, a wave pattern. If you do observe which slit, the interference pattern disappears, you get a particle pattern. Observation destroys interference. This much we know. But in the delayed choice quantum eraser, first proposed by Marlon Scully and Kai Druhl in 1982, and experimentally realized by Yoon Ho Kim and colleagues in 1999, something much stranger happens. Each photon that passes through the slits is paired with an idler photon through a process called spontaneous parametric down conversion. The signal photon goes to the main detector. The idler photon is sent on a longer path to a second set of detectors. The key: the idler photon carries which path? Information. Information about which slit the signal photon passed through. This which path information destroys the interference pattern at the main detector. So far, no surprise. But here is where the experiment becomes impossible. The idler photon's path includes beam splitters that can either preserve or erase the which path information. If the which path information is erased, if the idler photon's detectors are set up so that you can no longer determine which slit the signal photon passed through, the interference pattern reappears at the main detector. Let me say that again, because the implications are staggering. The signal photon has already been detected. It has already hit the main detector. It has already been recorded. Its position on the detector screen is a fact, a physical, irreversible fact written in the data. And yet whether that recorded position forms part of an interference pattern or a particle pattern depends on what happens to the idler photon afterward. The decision about what to do with the idler photon, whether to preserve or erase its which path information, can be made after the signal photon has already been recorded. Seconds after, minutes after, in principle, years after. The future measurement of the idler photon determines the past behavior of the signal photon. This is not a thought experiment. This was performed in a laboratory. The results are published. The data is unambiguous. The photon's past is influenced by its future. This is retrocausality, the future influencing the past. Through light, the standard interpretation is subtle and debated. Most physicists argue that no usable information travels backward in time. The retrocausal correlation only becomes visible when you compare the signal and idler datasets after the fact. You cannot use this to send messages to the past. The causality violation is real, but hidden visible only in the correlations, not in the raw data. It is as if the universe conspires to allow backward-in-time connections while preventing anyone from exploiting them. But the fact remains, light connects events across time in ways that defy our ordinary understanding of before and after. The photon does not respect the arrow of time. The photon does not distinguish cause from effect. For the photon which, as we established, does not experience time at all, the concepts of before and after are meaningless. The signal photon and the idler photon are correlated across a temporal gap. They are entangled, and their entanglement transcends the linear flow of time. In the Christian theological tradition, God's relationship to time has been debated for 2,000 years. But one view has been remarkably consistent across Catholic, Orthodox, and Reformed traditions. God sees all of time simultaneously. Boethius, the 6th century Roman philosopher, whose Consolation of Philosophy became one of the most influential texts in Western thought, defined eternity not as infinite time, but as the complete and perfect possession of unlimited life all at once. All at once, not sequentially, not past then present then future, all at once. God does not foresee the future. God sees the future the same way God sees the present and the past directly, immediately, simultaneously. Thomas Aquinas adopted Boethius's definition and made it central to Christian theology. In the Summa Theologiae, Aquinas argued that God's knowledge of future events is not foreknowledge, it is knowledge. God does not look forward in time to see what will happen. God looks at time from outside, the way you look at a road from a mountaintop. A traveller on the road sees only the stretch ahead and behind, but from the mountaintop, the entire road is visible, every bend, every junction, every traveller all at once. God is on the mountaintop, we are on the road. What we experience as the sequential unfolding of time, God experiences as a single, complete, eternally present reality. This resolves one of the deepest problems in Christian theology, the apparent contradiction between divine foreknowledge and human free will. If God foresees the future, are our choices predetermined? Aquinas' answer: God does not foresee, God sees. And seeing something happen does not cause it to happen. Your watching a sunset does not cause the sun to set. God's seeing your choice does not cause you to make it. Your choice is free. God's knowledge is complete. Both are true simultaneously because God exists outside the temporal sequence in which the apparent contradiction arises. The delayed choice quantum eraser demonstrates that light behaves as if before and after are not fixed categories. The photon's correlations transcend temporal sequence. The photon, like Boethius's God, exists in a mode where all moments are simultaneously accessible, where the future and the past are equally present, equally real, equally now. The retrocausal correlations in the quantum eraser are precisely what you would expect if the photon, like God, existed outside the arrow of time, in an eternal present, where the distinction between cause and effect dissolves. But light's role as cosmic connector goes even deeper, because light is not just a thing that travels through the universe. Light is the force that holds the universe together. In quantum field theory, the deepest and most precise theory of physics ever devised, forces between particles are mediated by the exchange of other particles. The electromagnetic force, the force that holds atoms together, that makes chemistry possible, that allows molecules to form and life to exist, is mediated by the exchange of virtual photons. When two electrons repel each other, they are exchanging photons. When a proton holds an electron in orbit, they are exchanging photons. When atoms bond to form molecules, photons are the messengers that communicate the force. This means that light is not just something that travels between objects. Light is the interaction itself. The force between charged particles is not transmitted through space, and then carried by light. The force is light. The electromagnetic interaction is the exchange of photons. Remove the photons and there is no force. Remove the photons and atoms fly apart. Remove the photons and chemistry ceases. Remove the photons and life is impossible. Remove the photons and the material universe dissolves into a cloud of disconnected particles with no structure, no order, no complexity. These are not ordinary photons, not the photons you see with your eyes, not the photons from the sun or from a light bulb. These are virtual photons, photons that exist for immeasurably brief durations, that cannot be directly detected, that pop into existence and vanish again in the process of mediating forces between charged particles. Virtual photons do not travel at the speed of light in the ordinary sense. They do not obey the normal rules of relativity. They exist in the quantum fog between interactions appearing out of the vacuum, carrying force between particles, and disappearing again before they can be observed. The vacuum of space, what appears to be empty nothingness, is, in quantum field theory, seething with virtual photons, trillions of them, popping in and out of existence at every point in space at every moment. The empty space between the nucleus of an atom and its electrons is not empty. It is a roiling sea of virtual photons, mediating the electromagnetic force that keeps the atom intact. The empty space between you and the screen you are looking at is not empty. It is filled with virtual photons, carrying the electromagnetic field that makes your vision possible. Everything that appears solid, every table, every wall, every bone in your body is held together by virtual photons. The resistance you feel when you push on a wall is not atoms touching atoms. It is photon fields repelling photon fields. The solidity of matter is an illusion created by light. Take away the photons, the real and the virtual, the visible and the invisible, and there is no matter. Only disconnected quarks and leptons drifting in a void. Richard Feynman, the Nobel Prize-winning physicist who developed quantum electrodynamics, or QED, and who is widely considered the greatest theoretical physicist of the second half of the 20th century, described this with characteristic clarity. In QED, every electromagnetic interaction is represented by a Feynman diagram, a deceptively simple picture showing particles exchanging photons. Two electrons approach each other. A photon is exchanged between them. The electrons are deflected. That is it. Every interaction between charged particles, every chemical bond, every electrical signal in your brain, every force that gives matter its structure is, at the deepest level, a conversation conducted in the language of light, particles talking to each other in photons, the universe narrating itself in light. Feynman called QED the jewel of physics, the most precisely tested theory in the history of science. Its predictions have been confirmed to an accuracy of 10 parts per billion. When QED says that light mediates the electromagnetic force, this is not speculation. It is the most precisely verified claim in all of science. And this means that your body is held together by light. The chemical bonds between the atoms in your DNA light. The electrical signals traveling between neurons in your brain light. The forces that give your bones their strength, your muscles their tension, your skin its integrity, all light. Every structure in the material world, from the hydrogen atom to the human brain, exists because photons are exchanged between charged particles. You are, quite literally, a being made of light, a structure of photonic interactions, a pattern woven from the exchange of the timeless, spaceless, eternal particles that connect everything in the universe to everything else. The Buddhist metaphor of Indra's net describes this with extraordinary precision. In the Avatamsaka Sutra, one of the most important texts in Mahayana Buddhism, composed in Central Asia in the 3rd or 4th century CE, the universe is described as an infinite net belonging to the god Indra. At every intersection of the net hangs a jewel. Each jewel is perfectly polished, so it reflects every other jewel in the net. And each reflection contains all the other reflections, which contain all the other reflections in an infinite cascade of mutual containment. Nothing exists independently. Everything reflects everything else. Everything contains everything else. The universe is a web of mutual interconnection in which each point contains the whole. This is not a vague spiritual insight. It is a precise structural description that maps directly onto quantum field theory. Every charged particle in the universe is connected to every other charged particle through the electromagnetic field, the photon field that permeates all of space. Every electron in your body is aware of, influenced by, correlated with, connected to every other charged particle in the observable universe through the photon field. The field is the net. The photons, real and virtual, are the reflections. Each point in the field contains information about the configuration of every other point. Change the position of an electron here, and the electromagnetic field adjusts everywhere instantaneously in the case of virtual photon exchange within the limits of the uncertainty principle. The Huayan school of Chinese Buddhism, which developed the philosophical implications of the Avatamsaka Sutra into one of the most sophisticated metaphysical systems in the history of thought, taught the doctrine of mutual interpenetration. Every phenomenon contains every other phenomenon. Every part contains the whole. The universe is not a collection of separate objects interacting across distances. It is a single, undivided field in which every point is intimately connected to every other point. The Buddhist master Fazang, writing in 7th century China, illustrated this with a famous demonstration. He placed a Buddha statue in the center of a room lined with 10 mirrors. Each mirror reflected the statue, and each mirror reflected every other mirror's reflection, creating an infinite cascade of mutual containment. One statue, infinite reflections, each containing all the others. One photon field, infinite interactions, each connected to every other through the universal medium of light. Now let me introduce the strangest idea in this part. It comes from John Archibald Wheeler, the physicist who named black holes, who coined the phrase "it from bit," who mentored Richard Feynman, and who spent his career asking the deepest questions about the nature of reality. Wheeler proposed the one-electron universe hypothesis. The idea, every electron in the universe is the same electron. A single electron traveling forward and backward through time, weaving back and forth across the history of the cosmos, appearing at each moment in billions upon billions of different locations simultaneously. Every electron you have ever encountered in your body, in the air you breathe, in the coffee you drank this morning, in the distant stars whose light reaches your eyes, is the same particle, seen at different points in its unimaginably complex, time-traveling journey through the history of the universe. Imagine a single thread woven through a tapestry. The thread passes through the fabric again and again, appearing at different points on the surface. If you look at the surface, you see what appear to be thousands of different threads, but they are all the same thread, viewed at different points in its journey through the weave. Wheeler's electron is this thread, the universe is the tapestry, and time is the loom. The positron, the electron's antiparticle, is, in Wheeler's hypothesis, simply the electron traveling backward in time. When an electron meets a positron and they annihilate each other, producing photons, this is not the destruction of two particles. It is the electron reversing its direction in time, turning around and heading back toward the past. The annihilation is a U-turn. The photons produced are the light emitted at the turning point. Wheeler's hypothesis was inspired by Feynman's work on QED, where the mathematical treatment of positrons as electrons moving backward in time proved extraordinarily fruitful. Feynman himself noted, Wheeler, who once described the positron as an electron going backward in time, gave me the idea. The mathematics of QED does not distinguish between an electron moving forward in time and a positron moving backward. The arrow of time, at the level of fundamental particles, is a convention, not a law. Wheeler's one-electron universe was not meant as a serious physical proposal. There are more electrons than positrons in the universe, which the hypothesis cannot easily explain. But the underlying insight that particles can travel in both directions through time, that the arrow of time is not fundamental, that the same entity can appear at multiple points in history is built into the mathematics of quantum field theory. And it reinforces the central theme of this exploration, light, and the particles that interact through light do not respect the distinction between past and future. Time, for the fundamental constituents of reality, is not a one-way street. It is a landscape, a terrain that can be traversed in any direction. In the Pali Canon, the earliest collection of Buddhist scriptures, the Buddha describes the nature of time in a way that anticipates Wheeler's insight. The past should not be followed after, and the future not desired. What is past is dead and gone, and the future is yet to come. But this is not a statement about linear time. It is a statement about the illusion of linear time. The Buddha's teaching on impermanence, anicca, is not that things change over time. It is that time itself is a construction of the mind. The present moment is the only reality. Past and future are mental fabrications, projections of memory and anticipation that obscure the timeless nature of direct experience. The Dzogchen tradition of Tibetan Buddhism goes even further. The natural state of mind, Rigpa, pure awareness, is described as timeless, not existing in the present moment, as if the present were a container, timeless, beyond time altogether. Rigpa does not move from past to future. It does not experience duration. It is the aware space in which the appearance of time arises, but it is not itself temporal. It is, in Buddhist terms, the mind's natural luminosity, its inherent quality of being light. Light, timeless, awareness. The same three words, appearing in physics and in Buddhist contemplative science, describing the same three properties of the same fundamental reality. And here is something that connects these two traditions with startling directness. In the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, the moment of death is described as the arising of the clear light of death, a luminous awareness that is the fundamental nature of mind. This clear light ozal in Tibetan is not metaphorical light. It is described as genuinely luminous. Experienced practitioners who achieve recognition of this light at the moment of death are said to attain liberation. Their awareness merges with the boundless clear light and does not return to the cycle of rebirth. In the Christian tradition, the experience of divine light is described in almost identical terms. The Hesychast monks of Mount Athos, practicing a form of contemplative prayer that dates back to the 4th century, describe experiencing the uncreated light, the same light that shone at Christ's transfiguration on Mount Tabor. This light, in the theology of Gregory Palamas, is not created. It is not a product of the brain. It is not a hallucination. It is God's own energy, the direct, experiential manifestation of divine presence. And monks who have practiced for decades describe it in terms remarkably similar to the Tibetan clear light. Luminous, boundless, beyond time, beyond self, the ground of all awareness. Two traditions, two continents, 2 millennia of independent development, and the same description. At the deepest level of consciousness, you encounter light, not metaphorical light, real light. The light that physics tells us is timeless. The light that quantum mechanics tells us responds to consciousness. The light that quantum field theory tells us holds all matter together. We have one more step to take, Because light is not just timeless, not just the connector of all things, not just the mediator of all forces. Light may also be the key to consciousness itself. The next part will explore the astonishing discovery that the human brain produces light biophotons, measurable and real, and that this light may be the physical substrate of conscious experience. The bridge between the photon in the physics laboratory and the light that every mystical tradition describes as the essence of awareness. That bridge is next. Your brain glows, not metaphorically, not symbolically, physically. Your neurons emit photons, particles of light, at a rate of roughly 1 to 100 photons per second per square centimeter of neural tissue. These photons are not visible to the naked eye. They are ultra-weak, 1 billion times fainter than the light you can see. But they are real, they are measurable, they are produced by every neuron in your brain. And a growing body of research suggests that these photons, called biophotons, may be the physical basis of consciousness itself. If this is true, then the ancient claim that consciousness is light, a claim made by Christians, Buddhists, Hindus, Muslims, and mystics of every tradition for thousands of years, is not a metaphor. It is a literal description of the physics of awareness. The light of consciousness is actual light. Photons, the same timeless, spaceless, eternal particles we have been exploring, the same particles that connect the past to the future, that mediate every force between every atom, that hold the material universe together. The light in the laboratory and the light in the monastery may be the same light. The discovery of biophotons began in 1923, when the Russian biologist Alexander Gurevich observed something peculiar. He placed 2 onion roots near each other, separated by a glass barrier. The root on one side stimulated cell division in the root on the other side, even though they were not touching. But when he replaced the glass with quartz, which, unlike glass, transmits ultraviolet light, the effect was enhanced. When he used opaque materials, the effect disappeared. Gurevich concluded that the onion roots were communicating through ultra-weak ultraviolet light emissions. He called them mitogenetic rays. The scientific community was skeptical. The detection technology of the 1920s was not sensitive enough to reliably measure such faint emissions. Gurevich's work was largely forgotten for decades, but in the 1970s, the German biophysicist Fritz Albert Popp, using newly developed photomultiplier tubes capable of detecting single photons, confirmed that living cells do indeed emit ultra-weak light. Popp measured biophoton emissions from plants, animals, bacteria, and human cells. He found that the emissions were not random. They were coherent, meaning the photons were organized, correlated, in phase with each other, like the photons in a laser beam rather than the chaotic photons from a light bulb. This coherence was extraordinary. Laser light is coherent because it is produced by a carefully engineered system, a gain medium, a pump source, mirrors aligned with extreme precision. The coherence of laser light is the result of sophisticated technology. And yet living cells without mirrors, without gain media, without any obvious optical engineering were producing coherent light. How? The coherence is the key. Random light thermal radiation from a hot object is incoherent. The photons are emitted independently, at random phases, with no correlation between them. This is the light from a light bulb, from a fire, from the sun. But coherent light is different. In coherent light, the photons are correlated. They oscillate in phase. They are organized. They carry information. A laser beam can carry data precisely because its photons are coherent, because they march in step, like soldiers in formation, rather than a crowd in a street. And Popp's biophotons were coherent. Whatever was producing them was not producing random noise. It was producing organized, information-carrying light. Popp proposed that DNA was the source. The double helix of DNA, he argued, acts as an excimer laser, a molecular system capable of storing and emitting coherent photons. The base pairs of DNA absorb photons, store the energy, and re-emit it in a coherent manner. This was controversial. It remains controversial, but subsequent research has confirmed the basic finding. Living cells emit coherent biophotons, and DNA is a plausible source. Now, let me bring this to the brain, because biophotons in onion roots are interesting. Biophotons in the human brain are revolutionary. In 2010, a team of researchers led by Masaki Kobayashi at the Tohoku Institute of Technology in Japan used ultra-sensitive cameras, photomultiplier tubes, and cooled CCD cameras capable of detecting individual photons to image biophoton emissions from the human body. They found that the body emits light that follows a diurnal rhythm, brighter during the day, dimmer at night, mirroring the fluctuation of metabolic activity across the sleep-wake cycle. They found that the face emits more biophotons than other parts of the body, particularly the area around the eyes, the forehead, and the mouth. And they found that the emissions correlated with metabolic activity. Areas of higher metabolic rate emitted more photons. The brain, which consumes 20% of the body's energy, despite comprising only 2% of its mass, is among the most metabolically active tissues in the body. If biophoton emission correlates with metabolic activity, the brain should be one of the brightest organs. And indeed, research on animal brains has confirmed significant biophoton emission from neural tissue. In 2014, a study by Tang and Dai demonstrated that rat brain slices produce biophotons that can be detected, quantified, and correlated with neural activity. The glutamate neurotransmitter system, the most important excitatory system in the brain, was shown to be directly involved in biophoton generation. When glutamate activity increased, biophoton emission increased. When it decreased, emission decreased. This is significant because glutamate is the neurotransmitter most associated with conscious processing. The neural correlates of consciousness, the brain activity patterns that track conscious experience, are predominantly glutamatergic. The system most closely associated with consciousness is also the system most closely associated with biophoton production. The coincidence is difficult to ignore, but the most significant research on brain biophotons came from a 2011 paper by Parisa Ranama and colleagues, who proposed that biophotons produced inside neurons could serve as a communication channel within the brain. Their argument: the conventional model of neural communication, electrical signals, traveling along axons and chemical signals, crossing synapses, is too slow and too limited to account for the speed and complexity of conscious processing. A typical neural signal travels at 1 to 100 meters per second. A photon travels at 300,000 kilometers per second. If neurons can communicate using biophotons, if light can carry information through the neural tissue, then the brain has access to a communication channel that is millions of times faster than electrical signaling. Ranama and colleagues proposed that the medium for this optical communication is the microtubule, the same structure that Penrose and Hameroff identified as the site of quantum consciousness in their OR theory. Microtubules are hollow cylindrical proteins that form the structural skeleton of every cell. They are 25 nanometers in diameter, roughly the wavelength of a photon in the ultraviolet range. This means that microtubules could, in principle, act as waveguides for biophotons, channeling light through the interior of neurons, the way fiber optic cables channel light through telecommunications networks. In 2017, a team led by Travis Craddock and Jack Tuzinski at the University of Alberta published a computational analysis showing that microtubules can indeed support the propagation of photons. Their simulations demonstrated that the geometric structure of the microtubule, its lattice of tubulin proteins, its hollow interior, its precise dimensions creates conditions suitable for channeling light in the ultraviolet and visible spectrum. The microtubule is not just a structural scaffold, it is an optical device, a biological fiber optic cable, engineered by evolution or by something else to carry light through the interior of the cell. Anirban Bandyopadhyay, the physicist at the National Institute for Materials Science in Japan, whose work on quantum resonance in microtubules we discussed in the Consciousness series, has found evidence that microtubules can transmit electromagnetic signals across a range of frequencies, including those in the photonic range. His experiments suggest that microtubules form a network, a connected system of resonating structures within and between neurons that could support both quantum coherence and photon transmission simultaneously. The implication is staggering. Your brain may contain a fiber optic network, a network of light running through the microtubules inside every neuron, carrying quantum coherent photons at the speed of light, connecting neurons in ways that the electrical model cannot explain. Consciousness, the hard problem, the mystery that has defeated every materialist explanation, may be a phenomenon of light, not electrical activity, not chemical signaling. Light. Actual photons traveling through actual waveguides inside actual neurons, producing the integrated, unified, instantaneous field of awareness that you are experiencing right now. This is where the contemplative traditions become directly relevant, not as metaphors, not as poetry, as data. In the Christian hesychast tradition, the tradition of contemplative prayer, practiced by Orthodox monks on Mount Athos and throughout the Eastern Christian world, the experience of divine light is not an occasional, exceptional event. It is the central goal of spiritual practice. The hesychast method, which involves the repetition of the Jesus prayer, Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me, combined with controlled breathing and specific postures, is designed to quiet the mind, still the body, and open the practitioner to the experience of the uncreated light. Simeon the New Theologian, a 10th century Byzantine monk, and one of the three saints specifically honored as theologians in the Eastern Orthodox tradition, described his experiences of this light in extraordinary detail. In his Hymns of Divine Love, he wrote of being engulfed by a light that was not physical, that did not come from any external source, that cast no shadows, that had no direction, but that was more real, more vivid, more present than any physical light he had ever seen. He described the light as alive, as conscious, as communicating directly with his awareness, not through words or images, but through a direct transmission of knowing, of understanding, of love. Simeon described the light as coming from within and without simultaneously. It filled his body, it filled the room, it filled the universe. There was no boundary between the light inside him and the light outside him. The distinction between inner and outer dissolved in the experience of the light. He described weeping not from sadness, but from the overwhelming beauty and presence of what he was experiencing. And he described the light as being, in some fundamental sense, the substance of God, not God's essence, which is unknowable and transcendent, but God's energy, which is experienceable and immanent. This distinction between God's essence, ousia, and God's energy, energeia, became the theological foundation of the hesychast tradition. Gregory Palamas, whose theology of the uncreated light we discussed in the previous part, defended the hesychast experience against critics who argued it was hallucination or self-delusion. Palamas argued that the light experienced by the monks was ontologically real, that it was the same light that the apostles, Peter, James, and John, saw at the transfiguration of Christ on Mount Tabor. In the Gospel accounts, Jesus took these three disciples to a mountain, and his face shone like the sun, and his clothes became as white as the light. Palamas taught that this was not a miracle in the sense of God temporarily violating the laws of nature. It was a revelation, a momentary lifting of the veil that normally conceals the divine light that pervades all of reality at all times. The transfiguration did not change Christ. It changed the disciples' perception. Their eyes were opened. They saw what was always there, the light that is always present but normally hidden. Seraphim of Sarov, an 18th century Russian Orthodox saint, was witnessed by his disciple Motovilov as radiating visible light during a conversation about the Holy Spirit. Motovilov described being unable to look directly at Seraphim's face because of the intensity of the light, a light that was accompanied by extraordinary warmth, a fragrance, and a sense of deep peace. Seraphim explained, "We are both in the Spirit of God now. Why don't you look at me?" Motovilov replied, "I cannot look, Father, because your face has become brighter than the sun, and my eyes ache with pain." Whatever the historical accuracy of this account, it represents a tradition documented across 2 millennia of Christian contemplative practice, in which advanced spiritual practitioners experience and sometimes visibly radiate light, and the Quaker tradition founded by George Fox in 17th century England places the inner light at the center of its theology. Fox taught that every human being carries within them a direct light from God, an inner light or light of Christ that illuminates the conscience, guides moral action, and provides direct, unmediated access to the divine. Quaker worship is conducted in silence, waiting for the inner light to speak. The light, in Fox's teaching, is not metaphorical. It is experiential, something felt, perceived, encountered in the depths of contemplative silence. The Buddhist tradition is equally specific about the experience of light in advanced meditation. In the Anguttara Nikaya, one of the collections of the Pali Canon, the earliest Buddhist scriptures, the Buddha describes the luminous mind. The Pali phrase is pabasara citta, the radiant mind, the shining mind. The Buddha said, "This mind, monks, is luminous, but it is defiled by adventitious defilements. The natural state of consciousness is light. The obscurations, the mental afflictions, the habitual patterns, the ignorance that veils our awareness, are adventitious. They are additions, not essentials. Remove them, and what remains is luminosity, pure, radiant awareness. The mind's natural state is light." In the Theravada meditation tradition, practitioners who achieve deep states of concentration, the jhanas, consistently report the arising of what is called the nimitta, a sign of concentration that appears as a bright, stable, radiant light in the field of awareness. The nimitta is not a visualization, it is not imagined. It arises spontaneously as concentration deepens. It begins as a flickering, unstable glow and gradually becomes steady, brilliant, and all-encompassing. Advanced practitioners describe being absorbed into the light, merging with it, becoming it in a state of consciousness that is described as profoundly blissful, utterly still, and extraordinarily clear. The Visuddhimagga, the 5th century meditation manual written by the Theravada master Buddhaghosa, describes the nimitta in precise detail. It appears first as a learning sign, a rough, unstable light. Then it becomes a counterpart sign, a pure, bright, luminous form. When the counterpart sign becomes stable, the meditator is on the threshold of the first jhana, a state of concentrated absorption that the Buddhist tradition describes as fundamentally different from ordinary waking consciousness. Remarkably, modern sensory deprivation research has produced parallel findings. When subjects are placed in total darkness in isolation tanks, in light-proof chambers, in conditions of complete visual deprivation, many report the spontaneous appearance of light. Not imagined light, perceived light. Phosphines, visual phenomena produced by the brain itself, without any external light stimulus. These phosphonies range from simple flashes and geometric patterns to complex, structured, brilliant light fields that subjects describe as overwhelming. The neurophysiologist Dominic Fitch at King's College London has studied these phenomena extensively. His research shows that visual deprivation does not produce darkness. It produces light. When the visual cortex is deprived of external input, it generates its own patterns, its own light. The brain, in the absence of external stimulation, reveals its own luminosity. This is precisely what the Buddhist tradition describes. When the adventitious defilements, the constant stream of sensory input, are removed through deep meditation, the mind's natural luminosity becomes visible. The light was always there. It was obscured by the noise of ordinary perception. Silence. The noise and the light appears. Modern neuroscience has confirmed that meditation produces measurable changes in brain function. Gamma wave activity, the fastest type of neural oscillation, operating at 30 to 100 Hz and associated with higher cognitive functions, sensory binding, and conscious awareness, increases dramatically in experienced meditators. Richard Davidson at the University of Wisconsin-Madison measured gamma activity in Tibetan Buddhist monks with over 10,000 hours of meditation practice and found levels of gamma synchrony that were, in Davidson's words, off the charts, the highest ever recorded in healthy human subjects. The monks' brains were oscillating in coherent gamma rhythms across vast neural networks, binding distant brain regions into a single, synchronized, unified pattern of activity. And gamma oscillations have been associated with biophoton production in neural tissue. A 2010 study by Botcon and colleagues proposed that biophotons produced during neural activity may be the physical carrier of conscious visual imagery, that when you imagine a scene, your visual cortex literally produces photons that represent the image. A 2016 study published in the journal Brain Research found a correlation between neural activity levels and biophoton emission in rat brains. Higher activity produced more photons, and a 2020 study by Zarkeshian and colleagues demonstrated that individual neurons can conduct photons along their axons, suggesting that biophotonic communication between neurons is not just theoretically possible but physically demonstrated. The connection is now more than suggestive. Deep meditation increases gamma activity. Gamma activity increases biophoton production. And deep meditators consistently report experiencing light, brilliant, luminous, overwhelming light that they describe as the most real thing they have ever perceived. The light of meditation may not be metaphorical. It may be the subjective experience of increased biophoton activity in the brain's own light, perceived from the inside. You are not imagining the light, you are seeing it, with the inner eye, the eye that is made of the same light it perceives. The Tibetan Buddhist tradition contains the most dramatic claims about light and consciousness. The rainbow body phenomenon documented in both Tibetan and Bonpo traditions involves an advanced practitioner whose body reportedly shrinks and dissolves into light at the time of death. Multiple eyewitness accounts describe the body of a deceased master shrinking over a period of days, accompanied by rainbows appearing in the sky and unusual lights in the vicinity of the body. In some cases, the body is reported to disappear entirely, leaving behind only hair and nails. The most recent well-documented case is that of Khenpo Akho, a Gelug monk in eastern Tibet who died in 1998. According to multiple witnesses, including his attendant, who photographed the process, Khenpo Akho's body shrank progressively over the week following his death, accompanied by a brilliant white light that filled his room. When the shrouds were finally opened, little remained. The Catholic priest Francis Tissot investigated this case and others, publishing his findings in the book Rainbow Body and Resurrection. Whether the rainbow body phenomenon is literally real or an expression of cultural and religious belief is an open question. But the consistency of the reports across centuries, across different Buddhist and Bonpo lineages, with multiple witnesses in each case, is striking. And the underlying claim that consciousness at its deepest level is light, and that a fully realized being can dissolve matter back into light, is consistent with what we know from physics. Consider Einstein's most famous equation, E equals mc squared. Energy equals mass times the speed of light squared. This equation tells us that matter and energy are interchangeable. That mass is a form of energy, and the conversion factor, the bridge between matter and energy, is the speed of light, squared. The speed of light is not just relevant to this conversion, it is the conversion. It is the constant that relates the world of matter to the world of energy. And energy, in its purest form, is light electromagnetic radiation, photons, the same timeless particles we have been discussing. Every particle in your body is, in Einstein's framework, a concentrated form of energy, of light, frozen light, condensed light, light that has been slowed down, given mass by its interaction with the Higgs field, locked into the crystalline structures of atoms and molecules and cells. Your body is not made of matter that happens to contain energy. Your body is made of energy of light that happens to be organized as matter. The rainbow body tradition says, a fully realized consciousness can reverse this process, can release the light, can dissolve the frozen into the fluid, can transform the condensed back into the free. This is E equals me squared, read in the opposite direction. Not energy becoming matter, but matter becoming energy, becoming light. The direction of the equation is a choice. Physics allows both directions. The rainbow body tradition claims that consciousness, at its fullest realization, can choose the direction. There is one more piece of evidence that connects light to consciousness in a way that is both scientific and deeply strange. The pineal gland, a small pine cone-shaped structure deep in the center of the brain, has been associated with light and consciousness across multiple traditions. René Descartes, the 17th century philosopher who defined the modern mind-body problem, identified the pineal gland as the seat of the soul. Hindu and Buddhist traditions identify the third eye, the Ajna chakra, with the location of the pineal gland. And modern research has revealed that the pineal gland contains photoreceptor cells, cells that detect light even though it is buried deep inside the brain, with no exposure to external light. The pineal gland of some animals, particularly reptiles and amphibians, is directly light sensitive, functioning as a third eye that detects changes in ambient light through the skull. In mammals, the pineal gland produces melatonin, the hormone that regulates sleep and circadian rhythms in response to light signals relayed from the retina. But recent research has suggested it may also produce endogenous dimethyltryptamine, DMT, a powerful psychoactive compound associated with vivid light experiences, mystical states, and near-death experiences. Rick Strassman, a psychiatrist at the University of New Mexico, conducted the first FDA-approved clinical trials of DMT in the 1990s and found that subjects consistently reported encountering brilliant, overwhelming light that they described as more real than ordinary vision, more vivid than any physical light, accompanied by a sense of profound truth and cosmic significance. The connection between the pineal gland, endogenous light, and mystical experience remains speculative. The evidence for endogenous DMT production in the human brain is preliminary, but the convergence is suggestive, a structure deep in the brain that is associated with light detection, that is identified by contemplative traditions as the seat of inner vision, and that may produce a compound whose primary experiential effect is the perception of overwhelming transcendent light. Here is where we stand. The brain produces biophotons, real, measurable light emitted by neurons. Microtubules may channel this light through the brain like a fiber optic network and computational models confirm that the physics works. Deep meditation increases the neural activity associated with biophoton production and simultaneously produces subjective experiences of brilliant light, and the correlation has been documented in peer-reviewed neuroscience journals. Sensory deprivation reveals the brain's own endogenous luminosity. When external light is removed, internal light appears. The pineal gland contains photoreceptors and may produce compounds associated with transcendent light experiences. And 2,000 years of contemplative practice across Christianity, Buddhism, and every major tradition describe the deepest states of consciousness as states of light. The Christian mystics say, God is light, and in deep prayer you can experience that light directly, not as metaphor, but as the most real perception of your life. The Buddhist tradition says, the mind is inherently luminous, and in deep meditation you can perceive that luminosity, the nimitta, the clear light, the radiant ground of awareness. Modern neuroscience says, neurons emit photons, microtubules may channel them, and the brain's own light increases during the states of consciousness that contemplatives describe. 3 traditions, 3 methods, 3 vocabularies. 1 finding, consciousness and light are not separate phenomena. They are aspects of the same reality. The light you perceive in the deepest states of awareness is not imaginary. It is the brain's own photons, perceived from the inside. And those photons are the same timeless, spaceless, eternal particles that connect the beginning of the universe to its end, that mediate every force between every atom, that hold reality together. The question that remains, the question that the final part of this series will address, is what happens when we put all of this together. The timelessness of light, the spacelessness of light, light as the connector of all causality, light as the mediator of all forces, light as the substrate of consciousness, and light as what every major religion identifies as the nature of God. If consciousness is light and light is timeless, then consciousness is timeless. If consciousness is light and light connects all things, then consciousness connects all things. If consciousness is light and light is what every religion calls God, then consciousness and God share the same physical nature. Here is everything we know. Light does not experience time. A photon exists in an eternal now state where the beginning and the end of the universe are the same moment. Light does not experience space. For a photon, every point in the universe is the same point. Light connects the future to the past. The delayed choice quantum eraser shows that a future measurement determines the past behavior of a photon. Light holds all matter together. Every atom in your body exists because photons mediate the electromagnetic force between charged particles. Light responds to consciousness. The act of observation determines whether a photon behaves as a wave or a particle, and your brain produces light biophotons, real and measurable, channeled through microtubules, correlated with the neural activity that underlies conscious awareness. Now here is what every major religion teaches. God is timeless. God is omnipresent. God knows the future and the past simultaneously. God holds all of creation together. God is conscious indeed. God is consciousness itself. And God is light. The parallels are not vague. They are not approximate. They are precise. Property by property, attribute by attribute. The physics of light and the theology of God match. Timelessness, omnipresence, connection across time, sustaining all things, responsive to consciousness, identical with light. This final part asks the question that everything has been building toward. Is this a coincidence, or does the physics of light reveal something about the nature of God that the religions have been describing for millennia? Let me begin with the tradition that has developed the most systematic theology of light, Eastern Christianity. The Christian understanding of light as divine is not a peripheral teaching. It is central. It is creedal. It is liturgical. Every Sunday, in every Orthodox church in the world, the congregation chants, "We have seen the true light. We have received the heavenly Spirit. We have found the true faith." The true light. Not metaphorical light. Not the light of understanding or the light of knowledge in some abstract sense. The true light, the light that was seen at the Transfiguration, the light that struck Paul blind on the road to Damascus, the light that the Hesychast monks experience in the depths of contemplative prayer. The theological architecture of this understanding was built by three thinkers whose combined influence shaped the entire Eastern Christian tradition. First, Pseudo-Dionysius the Areopagite, a mysterious 5th century author whose works became foundational for both Eastern and Western Christian mysticism. His influence is immense. Thomas Aquinas cited him more than any other author except the Bible. Meister Eckhart built his entire mystical theology on Dionysian foundations. The Victorine school, the Rhineland mystics, the cloud of unknowing all draw from Dionysius. Dionysius described God through a paradox that has haunted Western theology for 15 centuries. God is divine darkness, utterly beyond human comprehension, beyond all concepts, beyond all names, beyond even the concept of beyond, and simultaneously God is the light that illuminates all things. The darkness is not the absence of light. It is the superabundance of light, light so intense, so overwhelming, so far beyond the capacity of the human mind to process, that it appears as darkness, like staring into the sun. The sun is the brightest object in the sky, but if you look directly at it, you see nothing. The excess of light blinds. God's light is so total, so complete, so infinite, that the finite mind experiences it as darkness. Not because God is dark, because God is too bright. In his work, The Mystical Theology, Dionysius described Moses ascending Mount Sinai as a journey into increasing light that is experienced as increasing darkness. At the base of the mountain, there is ordinary light, comprehensible, manageable, partial. As Moses ascends, the light intensifies. At the summit, he enters the cloud of unknowing, the divine darkness, where all concepts fail, all language dissolves, and the soul encounters God directly, beyond all mediation of thought. The light at the summit is not less than the light at the base. It is infinitely more, but it is too much for the mind to contain, and so it is experienced as darkness, luminous darkness, radiant unknowing. This is not poetry. This is a precise description of a phenomenon that physics recognizes. When a detector is overwhelmed by input, when more photons arrive than the sensor can process, the result is not a bright image. It is whiteout, saturation. The detector registers nothing meaningful because it is receiving everything at once. The mind that encounters the infinite light of God is a detector encountering infinite input. The result is the divine darkness, the luminous darkness that Dionysius describes. Second, Maximus the Confessor, the 7th century theologian who synthesized the entire patristic tradition into a unified vision of the universe as a movement toward God. Maximus taught that the Logos, the divine word, the creative principle identified with light in the Gospel of John, is present in every created thing as its logoi, its inner principle, its rational structure, its meaning. Every tree, every stone, every star, every atom contains within it a logoi, a word of God, a ray of the divine light, a connection to the Logos that created it. This means that the entire universe is, in Maximus's theology, made of light, not physically made of photons. Maximus was not a physicist, but made of the rational, luminous, intelligent principle that gives each thing its form, its structure, its existence. The logoi are the divine light refracted through the prism of creation, a single white light broken into the infinite spectrum of created things. Each thing is a color. The logos is the white light that contains them all. The physics is remarkably parallel. In quantum field theory, every particle in the universe is an excitation of a quantum field. The electron is an excitation of the electron field. The quark is an excitation of the quark field, and every interaction between these particles is mediated by photons, excitations of the electromagnetic field. The photon field pervades all of space. It connects every charged particle to every other charged particle. It gives matter its structure, its stability, its coherence. Remove the photon field, and the material universe dissolves. The photon field is, in the language of physics, what Maximus's logos is in the language of theology, the universal, all-pervading, structuring principle that holds reality together and gives each thing its form. Third, Gregory Palamas, whose theology of the uncreated light we have discussed in previous parts. Palamas's crucial contribution was the distinction between God's essence, ousia, and God's energies, energiae. God's essence is utterly transcendent, unknowable, inaccessible, beyond all categories of thought. But God's energies, God's active, creative, sustaining power are immanent. They pervade creation. They can be experienced, and they are light. Not created light, uncreated light. The same light that shone at the Transfiguration. The same light that the monks of Mount Athos perceive in prayer. The same light that, in Palamas's theology, is the medium through which God is present in the world, without being contained by the world. The Palamite distinction maps directly onto the physics. The photon's essence, what it is in itself, from its own frame of reference, is inaccessible to us. As we discussed in part 1, the photon does not have a proper reference frame. We cannot know what it is like to be a photon. We cannot access the photon's own experience of reality. The photon's essence is, in a precise technical sense, unknowable. But the photon's energies, its effects, its interactions, its measurable manifestations, are everywhere. Every force, every bond, every structure in the material world is a manifestation of photonic energy. We cannot access what the photon is. We can access what the photon does. Essence unknowable, energies everywhere. Palamas described the structure of light 7 centuries before quantum field theory formalized it. Now let me turn to Buddhism, which approaches the identity of light, consciousness, and ultimate reality from a completely different direction and arrives at a strikingly similar place. The Buddha of infinite light, Amitabha, is the central figure of Pure Land Buddhism, the most widely practiced form of Buddhism in East Asia. Amitabha's name means boundless light or infinite radiance. He presides over Suhrawardi, the Western Pure Land, a realm described in the sutras as pervaded by golden light, where every surface radiates luminosity, where the very ground shines, where light is not something that illuminates objects, but is the substance of which objects are made. Suhrawardi is a universe made of light, not a universe illuminated by light, a universe whose fundamental material is light. This is, in Buddhist terms, a description of the universe as it actually is when perceived without the obscurations of ignorance. The Pure Land is not another place. It is not a heaven located somewhere in the cosmos. It is this place, this earth, this universe, this reality, seen clearly. The golden light is not a supernatural addition to reality. It is reality's own nature, perceived without the veils of conceptual thought, of craving, of aversion, of the deeply conditioned habit of seeing the world as composed of separate, solid, independent objects existing in empty space. Remove the obscurations and what you see is light. The world, as it is light. And here is where the physics becomes directly relevant. In the standard model of particle physics, the fundamental state of all matter is massless. Quarks, electrons, all the building blocks of matter in their natural state, before the Higgs field gives them mass, are massless particles traveling at the speed of light. The Higgs field is, in physical terms, the obscuration, the mechanism that slows particles down, gives them mass, makes them appear as solid, heavy material. Remove the Higgs field and everything becomes light. Literally, every particle in the universe would travel at the speed of light, experiencing no time, no space, no separation. The universe without the Higgs field is Suhrawardi, a reality made entirely of light. The Pure Land Sutras describe Amitabha's light as having specific properties. It is boundless, it reaches everywhere. It is unimpeded, nothing can block it. It is all-embracing, it includes all beings. And it is liberating contact with it frees beings from suffering. These are not arbitrary spiritual qualities. They are the physical properties of the photon field. The electromagnetic field is boundless. It extends throughout all of space. It is unimpeded. Virtual photons penetrate all matter. It is all-embracing. Every charged particle in the universe interacts with it. And it is liberating in the precise physical sense that without it, atoms cannot form, chemistry cannot occur, and the structured complexity that makes consciousness possible does not exist. Amitabha's light and the photon field share every defining property. Vairocana, the cosmic Buddha, the great illuminator, represents this insight at its most radical. In the Avatamsaka Sutra, Vairocana is not a being who possesses light. Vairocana is the universe experiencing itself as light. Every atom, every particle, every moment of existence is Vairocana's body. Every photon is a manifestation of Vairocana's awareness. The universe is not illuminated by a divine light external to it. The universe is divine light, experiencing itself from the inside. The Dzogchen tradition of Tibetan Buddhism identifies the fundamental nature of mind with light in the most explicit terms of any contemplative tradition. The nature of mind Rigpa has three inseparable qualities: emptiness, sunyata, luminosity, ozal, and unceasing energy tsal. The mind is empty, it has no fixed form, no substance, no location. The mind is luminous, it shines, it illuminates, it is inherently radiant, and the mind is dynamic, it manifests ceaselessly as thoughts, perceptions, experiences, worlds. These three qualities, emptiness, luminosity, energy, map with remarkable precision onto the three properties of the photon. The photon is empty of location. It exists in superposition, spread across all possible paths, having no definite position until observed. The photon is luminous. It is, literally, light, the paradigm of luminosity. And the photon is dynamic. It is the mediator of all electromagnetic interactions, the carrier of force, the agent of change in every atomic and molecular process. The Dzogchen master, Longchenpa, the 14th century scholar yogi, who systematized the Dzogchen teachings into what many consider the most complete presentation of the Buddhist path, wrote that the natural state of awareness is like a crystal ball. The crystal ball has no color of its own. It is transparent, empty, but it reflects everything placed before it perfectly. It illuminates everything without distorting anything. It contains nothing, yet displays everything. When you look at a crystal ball, you do not see the ball. You see through it. You see what it reflects. The ball itself is invisible, and yet without the ball, the reflections do not appear. The ball is the condition for the reflections. It is present in every reflection without being any of them. This is the mind's natural luminosity, and it is a precise description of the photon's interaction with matter. The photon has no mass, no charge, no internal structure. No color of its own color is something the photon creates in the eye of the observer, not something it possesses. It is, in a sense, the most empty particle in physics, the particle with the fewest intrinsic properties, the particle that is most purely relational, most purely about connection rather than substance. And yet it is the medium through which all color, all form, all visual reality is perceived. It contains nothing and reveals everything. Longchenpa also wrote that the three qualities of Rigpa, emptiness, luminosity, and energy, are inseparable. You cannot have luminosity without emptiness. You cannot have energy without luminosity. The three are one. They are three descriptions of a single reality that cannot be divided into components. The photon exhibits exactly this inseparability. Its emptiness, its masslessness, its zero rest frame, its lack of intrinsic properties is what makes its luminosity possible. Because it has no mass, it travels at the speed of light. Because it travels at the speed of light, it is timeless. Because it is timeless, it can connect events across the entire universe instantaneously. And because it connects all things, it is the carrier of all energy, the dynamic force that drives every electromagnetic interaction. Emptiness enables luminosity. Luminosity enables energy. The three are inseparable. The photon is the physical realization of Longchenpa's metaphysics, a single entity in which emptiness, luminosity, and energy are one. The Islamic tradition of Illuminationism, Ishraq, deserves attention here, because it is one of the few philosophical systems built entirely on the metaphysics of light. Shahab al-Din Suhrawardi, a 12th century Persian philosopher, executed at age 36 for the perceived heresy of his ideas, developed a complete ontology based on light. In Suhrawardi's system, reality is not composed of matter and form, as in Aristotle, or of substance and accident, as in mainstream Islamic philosophy. Reality is composed of light and darkness. Light is existence itself. To exist is to be illuminated. To be more real is to be more luminous. God, the light of lights. Nur al-Anwar is the source of all illumination, the most real being, the pure light from which all other lights derive. The Quran provides the scriptural foundation for this philosophy. Surah An-Nur 24:35. God is the light of the heavens and the earth. The example of his light is like a niche within which is a lamp, the lamp within glass. The glass as if it were a brilliant star, fueled from a blessed olive tree, neither of the east nor of the west, whose oil would almost glow, even if untouched by fire. Light upon light. God guides to his light whom he wills. This verse, the verse of light, is one of the most commented upon passages in the Quran. Al-Ghazali, the greatest theologian in the Sunni tradition, devoted an entire treatise to its interpretation, the Mishkat al-Anwar, the niche of lights. Ghazali argued that the verse describes a hierarchy of light from the physical light of the lamp to the spiritual light of the intellect to the divine light of God. Each level of light is more real, more luminous, more fundamental than the level below it. And the highest level, light upon light, is God's own nature, not a property of God. God's nature. God does not have light. God is light. Ghazali went further. He argued that the phrase, God is the light of the heavens and the earth, is not metaphorical. He acknowledged that most scholars interpreted it metaphorically. God is the guide, the illuminator, the source of knowledge. But Ghazali argued that the literal meaning is the deeper meaning. In the Mishkat, he constructed a hierarchy of 5 veils, 5 levels of obscuration that separate the human mind from the direct perception of divine light. At the bottom the veil of the senses, which shows us only the physical world. Above that, the veil of imagination, which distorts what the senses receive. Above that, the veil of discursive reason, which breaks reality into fragments. Above that, the veil of the self, which filters everything through the lens of ego. And at the top, the final veil, which is the belief that you are separate from the light at all. Remove the veils one by one, through spiritual practice, through purification, through the grace of God, and what remains is not darkness. What remains is light. Pure, undifferentiated, infinite light. The light that was always there, the light that was always you. God is, literally, the light of reality. The physical light that you see with your eyes is a distant reflection, the lowest manifestation of the divine light. And the reason physical light has the properties it has, timelessness, omnipresence, the power to reveal, the power to connect, is that physical light is a manifestation of divine light. The properties of the photon are reflections of the properties of God. The physics of light is a shadow of the theology of God, cast upon the wall of the material world. The Hindu tradition completes the picture with its own systematic theology of light. The Gayatri Mantra, the most sacred verse in Hinduism, chanted daily by millions, found in the Rig Veda, the oldest religious text in continuous use, is an invocation of light. We meditate on the divine light of that adorable sun. May it illuminate our minds. The adorable sun, Savitri, is not the physical sun. It is the divine light that the physical sun symbolizes. The light of consciousness, the light of Brahman. The mantra asks for illumination, not information, not knowledge, not wisdom in the intellectual sense, but direct illumination, direct contact with the light that is the source of all awareness. The Mundaka Upanishad describes Brahman, the ultimate reality, as Jyotisham Jyoti, the light of lights. The same phrase Suhrawardi used, Nur al-Anwar, the same concept, a light so fundamental, so primary, that all other lights, physical, intellectual, spiritual, are derivatives of it. All light is a manifestation of this one light. The sun's light is a manifestation. The fire's light is a manifestation. The light in your eye is a manifestation. And the light of consciousness, the awareness that illuminates every experience from the inside, is the most direct manifestation of all. Advaita Vedanta, the non-dual school of Hindu philosophy, makes the most radical claim of any philosophical system in history. Shankara, the 8th century philosopher who consolidated the Advaita tradition, argued that Brahman, the light of lights, and Atman, the light of individual consciousness, are identical. Tattvamasi, thou art that. The light that illuminates the universe from without and the light that illuminates your experience from within are the same light. Not similar, not parallel, not analogous, identical. One light, appearing as two because of the illusion of separation Maya, the cosmic veil that makes the one appear as many, the infinite appear as finite, the eternal appear as temporal. The Mandukya Upanishad describes 4 states of consciousness: waking, dreaming, deep sleep, and Turiya, the 4th state, the ground state, the state that underlies and pervades the other 3. Turiya is described as pure awareness, awareness without an object, consciousness without content, light without anything to illuminate. In Turiya, the distinction between subject and object dissolves. The seer and the seen are one. The light and what the light reveals are one. There is only luminosity, self-luminous, self-aware, self-existing, not a light that shines on something, a light that shines by itself, as itself, for itself. And here is where Advaita and biophoton research converge with startling precision. If consciousness is produced by biophotons, if the subjective experience of awareness is the inner aspect of photonic activity in neural microtubules, then the light of consciousness and the light of physics are literally the same light. The photon that mediates electromagnetic forces between atoms is the same kind of entity as the biophoton in your neuron. The light that holds the universe together and the light that illuminates your awareness are photons, the same particle, the same timeless, spaceless, eternal entity. Shankara's claim that the light of Brahman and the light of Atman are identical becomes, in the language of physics, the photon field that pervades the universe and the biophoton field in the brain are the same electromagnetic field, not analogous, not parallel, the same field, the same light. Remove the illusion of separation and you see the light in the physicist's laboratory, the light in the monk's cell, the light in the meditator's mind, and the light that holds the atoms of the universe together are one light. They have always been one light. They will always be one light. Here is the honest assessment. The parallels between the physics of light and the theology of light across every major tradition are extraordinary. They are precise. They are structural, and they appear independently across traditions that developed in isolation from each other. Christianity says God is light, timeless, omnipresent, the creator and sustainer of all things. Physics says light is timeless, spaceless, the mediator of all forces, the carrier of all causal structure. Buddhism says the mind is inherently luminous, and the universe perceived without obscuration is a universe of light. Physics says matter is frozen light, and the fundamental state of all particles without the Higgs interaction is massless traveling at the speed of light. Islam says God is the light of the heavens and the earth, light upon light, and physical light is a reflection of divine light. Physics says the photon field pervades all of space, connects all charged particles, and gives matter its structure. The electromagnetic field is, quite literally, the light of the heavens and the earth. Hinduism says the light of consciousness and the light of the universe are the same light. Neuroscience says the brain produces biophotons, the same photons that mediate all electromagnetic interactions, and these biophotons may be the physical substrate of conscious experience. But, and I must say this, because the series demands it, parallels are not proofs. The fact that photons are timeless does not prove that God is timeless. The fact that biophotons exist in the brain does not prove that consciousness is light. The fact that every religion identifies God with light does not prove that God exists. It might prove only that light is the most impressive natural phenomenon available to ancient thinkers, seeking a metaphor for the transcendent. The skeptical interpretation, light is spectacular. It is the fastest thing in the universe. It makes vision possible. It brings warmth and life. It dispels darkness. Of course, pre-scientific cultures used light as a metaphor for God. The parallel tells us about human psychology, not about divine reality. The alternative interpretation. The religions did not choose light as a metaphor randomly. They chose it because their contemplative practices, their meditation, their prayer, their fasting, their silence, gave them direct experiential access to the deep nature of consciousness. And what they found, at the deepest level, was light, real light, the brain's own light, the light that physics now tells us is timeless, spaceless, and fundamental to all of reality. The parallel between physics and theology is not metaphorical. It is a convergence, two methods of investigation, arriving at the same finding through different paths. I cannot tell you which interpretation is correct. No honest person can. The data supports both. The physics is real. Light is timeless. Light is fundamental. Light holds matter together. The brain produces light. The contemplative reports of real meditators and monks across every tradition describe experiencing light at the deepest levels of awareness. The convergence is real physics, and theology described the same properties, using the same word, pointing to the same reality. What I can tell you is this: the convergence is unprecedented in the history of human thought. No other physical phenomenon, not gravity, not electromagnetism in general, not the nuclear forces, not thermodynamics, has been independently identified by every major religion as the nature of God. No other physical phenomenon has the specific properties, timelessness, omnipresence, creative power, responsiveness to consciousness that every major theology attributes to the divine. Only light, only the photon, only the one particle in physics that does not experience time, that connects all things, that mediates all forces, and that the human brain produces in the very neural processes that correlate with conscious awareness. This may mean everything, or it may mean nothing more than that light is impressive and humans reach for impressive things when they try to name the unnameable. But even the skeptical interpretation carries a lesson. If light is merely a metaphor, if the religions chose it only because it was the most powerful natural phenomenon available, then it is the most successful metaphor in the history of human language. A metaphor that, by sheer coincidence, predicted the properties of the photon 3,000 years before physics discovered them. A metaphor that described the timelessness of light before Einstein, the omnipresence of light before quantum field theory, the creative power of light before QED, and the connection between light and consciousness before biophoton research. A metaphor that got everything right. By accident. Some accidents are too precise to be accidents. You are a being that produces light. Your neurons emit photons. Your brain may contain a network of light running through the microtubules of every neuron, connecting your awareness to itself at the speed of light. And the light you produce is the same light that has been traveling since the birth of the universe, the same timeless, eternal, spaceless light that connects every moment of cosmic history into a single, undivided now. When you close your eyes and look inward into the darkness behind your eyelids, into the silence behind your thoughts, you are looking into the same darkness that Pseudo-Dionysius described, the luminous darkness, the darkness that is not the absence of light but the superabundance of it, the darkness where the brain's own light, freed from the noise of external stimulation, becomes perceptible, the darkness where the mystics of every tradition have found what they all call by the same name, light, the light that does not experience time, the light that holds all things together, the light that connects the beginning to the end, the light that every religion identifies with God, the light that shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. You are that light. You have always been that light. And the deepest question in the universe, what is the relationship between consciousness, light, and God, may have the simplest answer imaginable. They are the same thing. Seen from different angles, described in different languages, investigated through different methods, but one, light upon light,